Hello and welcome to another video. Now, about 3 months after I first arrived in Germany, I was going to deal with some immigration paperwork and I stopped by at a deli, and there they had these very interesting sandwiches that were half buns of bread topped with a minced raw pork mixture and onions on top of this. Slightly confused, I asked them, do I need to cook this? Or how do I cook this? And I was told, you do not cook it, you eat it fresh for breakfast. That was my introduction to Schweinemett, or in Berlin sometimes called Hackepeter. This is a minced raw pork spread that goes on bread, usually topped with raw onions, and it forms a very important part of North German cuisine. Today we're going to make a very specific kind of Mett called Thuringer Mett. This is Thuringia style raw pork that is then eaten on bread as a sandwich, typically for breakfast or maybe lunch. Now here in Germany, although you're probably going, oh, that sounds terribly dangerous, here in Germany there are a very large number of regulations that are aimed at making this specific dish very safe. So, fairly safe to eat in Germany, be a little more cautious everywhere else. If you're trying to make this in the US, pork is not as dangerous as it used to be, but make sure you get it from a trusted source. So, I'll leave that decision about risk up to you. Of course, note the CDC says don't eat raw meat, but you know, there's beef tartare and dishes like this. So, on to the ingredients. So what I have here is I have a shoulder chop. This one's not bone in, and this will form the raw meat behind my dish. I have an onion, chop that for toppings. Bread. Now, typically you want a sourdough or a sourdough rye. Those are both really good. And if you're again trying to do this in the US, a caraway rye would not be a bad choice, for reasons that will become obvious in a little bit. We'll also put a bit of butter on the bread before we put the Hackepeter on. Now we're going to season the Hackepeter with salt, with pepper, with caraway, and with a little bit of nutmeg. Now it's the caraway and nutmeg that make this Thuringian style, or Thuringer Mett. If you are making like a straight Hackepeter, it would just be salt and pepper. So let's go ahead and get started. So there are a few ways you can do this from here. The normal way is to use a meat grinder. Since I don't have a meat grinder, I'm going to use a knife. Now I've chosen to use a nice meat cleaver. It needs to be really sharp. So this can also double as a tutorial on how to hand mince meat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by cutting at a 45-degree angle, a bunch of thin cuts most of the way through the meat. Most of the way through the meat because I don't want everything to fall apart quite yet. And this will just take a few moments. Then I'm going to flip it upside down, rotate it 90 degrees, and repeat the process. And it's good to have these be relatively thin slices. Again, it's not all the way through. But after the second time, I'm going to have basically a whole bunch of areas where this is basically hanging together through like a thread. So if I pick this up now, it's going to really deform, and that's because, you know, it's been kind of semi-minced. So from here, I'm going to just kind of roll it up a little bit. I'm going to start slicing it. Again, nice and thin is best. And then after the second slice, then I'm going to season it. After the slicing process, then I'm going to season it. Because from here, we will be slicing and dicing and mixing. And so this is a good spot to season it. Just because at this point things will still... So I have about a bit of salt here, say maybe a 1/4 teaspoon. Season it with freshly ground black pepper. See, when this is a dish where high quality ingredients are really helpful. A bit of caraway, maybe again a 1/4 teaspoon, and just a tiny dash of nutmeg. And most of the recipes you'll find will call for mace in English, but the fact of the matter is nobody uses mace here in Germany as far as I can tell. It's all nutmeg. So I would say just a tiny pinch of nutmeg. And then from here, we're going to just kind of grab everything together, and we're going to just basically repeatedly cut this into little pieces. And I will be back when this process is done, and we will look at next steps and presentation. So now I've run this through about like 4 rounds of just finely mincing this, and now I think this is fine enough. So I'm going to go ahead and just set this aside for the moment, and I'm going to take my onion and I'm going to basically thinly slice it so that I have slices of onion to put on top when I'm done. And I'm just going to use a mandolin slicer for that. You can do it with a knife if you like. So I have thinly sliced these on a mandolin slicer. They're nice and consistent. I've also put a very thin spread of butter here. You want to keep the butter thin, and if for some reason you have a particularly fatty piece of meat, maybe use less. And then basically I'm just going to put some of this Mett on top, and top it with some onions. Now let's go for the Audi logo, shall we? Not quite the Audi logo, but it's pretty close. And I will do this with the other 2 pieces, and I'll be right back once I have these done. And so here we have Thuringer Mett on bread. This is gonna be a great lunch. Really excited to try. And now for the taste test. This is really good. Really good. If you ever make it to Germany, you have to try the Mett. Now, if you find this content useful, I hope I've earned a subscription from you. You can click the bell to make sure you won't miss any of my videos. And if you like this video in particular, I'd encourage you to comment on it, tell me what you like, what you don't like, provide suggestions for next time. I do read every comment. I usually respond to almost every comment. And I look at likes, comments, and views when deciding what to do my next video on. So this is an invitation to you to participate in helping me decide what kind of content I would like to produce next. Now, beyond that, I just want to say bon appetit and see you next week.